Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a truly monumental shift in how we think about the food we eat. For decades, we've basically relied on these massive, population-level dietary guidelines. We all grew up with the classic food pyramids and standard plates designed for the average person. But today, we're unpacking the transition from those very broad strokes to highly individualized genomics-driven health interventions. We are literally moving from dietary guesswork to an exact biological science. It's fascinating stuff.
Here is our roadmap for today's journey. We'll start with the end of average, then move into decoding your biological blueprint. After that, we'll look at the precision tech stack, managing chronic diseases, the barriers to widespread adoption, and finally wrap up with the future of public health. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The end of average. Moving beyond one-size-fits-all.
Now notice the stark contrast between these two paradigms. Traditional nutrition was fundamentally built on historical food scarcity. The main goal? Just preventing baseline nutrient deficiencies. We're talking about stopping scurvy or rickets. It was a very broad, one-size-fits-all approach that relied heavily on memory-based dietary surveys, which, let's be honest, are notoriously inaccurate. Personalized nutrition completely flips the script. Its primary goal isn't just stopping a deficiency, it's actively preventing and managing modern chronic diseases like obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular issues. And it does this by mapping dietary interventions directly to your specific genetic variability, using advanced bioinformatics to build predictive models. To put it simply, it's the difference between buying a cheap suit off the rack and having one bespoke tailored to your exact measurements.
Section 2. Decoding your biological blueprint, getting down to the DNA level.
We've all been told to lower our sodium intake, right? It's like the most universal guideline out there. But take a look at the SGK1 variant here. It brilliantly illustrates how a single genetic variation can dictate completely diverging metabolic destinies. If you have the standard genotype, your metabolic response to standard salt intake is totally normal. However, if you carry a specific risk allele for the SGK1 gene, consuming a high-salt diet significantly spikes your systolic blood pressure, and that effect is completely absent in the standard group. So what does this mean? It proves that a generic low-salt guideline is fundamentally insufficient for the people who actually need it. It's a perfect, real-world example of why precision matters so much.
Now, to really grasp how we measure these complex dietary impacts, we need to quickly define a term you're going to hear a lot: multi-omics. This is the comprehensive analysis of various biological data layers to see the full, dynamic picture of your health. We're going way beyond just a static DNA cheek swab here.
Think of it like a giant funnel. Watch how dietary inputs pass right through this multi-omics funnel. At the very top, you have your diet. As those nutrients enter your system, they hit the first layer, transcriptomics. This is where we see how specific nutrients literally switch your genes on or off. Next, it flows down to proteomics, exploring the array of proteins produced and how your cellular structures physically change. Finally, it reaches metabolomics, which delves into the distinct chemical imprints and small molecule metabolites that form the final cellular output. All of this funnels down to create your unique individual phenotype. That's your observable health status, right now, today. And that is the exact baseline we use for precise dietary adjustments.
So the real game changer here is that we can now map specific genetic markers directly to actionable clinical dietary interventions. No more generalized guesswork. Take the MTHFR gene, for example. If you have a variation there, your folate metabolism is impacted, which actually increases cardiovascular risk. The solution? Tailored folate supplementation that totally bypasses the standard recommended daily allowances. What about an APO variant? Well, that affects lipid metabolism and your risk for coronary artery disease, so you need a highly specific modification of your fat intake and a boost in long-chain omega-3s. Then there's the FTO gene, which is closely linked to energy balance and a high susceptibility to obesity. That demands really specific macronutrient adjustments. And finally, TCF7L2, which impacts blood sugar regulation and flags a risk for type 2 diabetes. If you have that marker, it means strictly controlled carbohydrate intake and continuous glycemic monitoring. It is remarkably, incredibly specific.
Section 3. The precision tech stack, turning biological data into continuous action. How do we actually do this? Well, the goal is transforming point-in-time testing into a continuous, iterative clinical life cycle, and it requires these 4 steps. First, the genomic blueprint, capturing your underlying DNA. Second, data synthesis, combining that raw genetic data with your lifestyle markers inside a clinical database. Third, targeted implementation, which means deploying highly personalized meal plans based on that synthesized data. And fourth, real-time monitoring, assessing your actual metabolic outcomes to ensure you're on track.
This creates a really powerful loop of continuous diet adjustment based purely on your real-time feedback.
When you stack it all together, you get these two distinct parts. On the left, we have the tech stack pyramid. The foundation here is genomic sequencing, identifying those genetic predispositions we talked about. The interface, the part you actually interact with, relies on wearables and mobile health apps, providing real-time physiological tracking. But the true engine powering the whole shebang is bioinformatics and AI, processing all that massive omics big data. Now look at the unified model on the right. You see how the static DNA blueprint, the dynamic metabolic data streaming from your smartwatch, and your environmental inputs all feed into the central AI core. It synchronizes everything seamlessly to generate fluid, dynamic dietary adjustments. It's constantly evolving your nutritional prescription to prevent chronic disease before it even has a chance to manifest.
Section 4. Managing Chronic Diseases. Clinical Efficacy in Action.
We aren't just talking theory here. The data clearly shows that these precise interventions easily replace the old trial-and-error dietetics, yielding vastly superior outcomes. Just look at cardiovascular health. The benchmark Predimed study definitively proved that personalizing the Mediterranean diet based on specific genotypes is significantly more effective for preventing cardiovascular disease than throwing broad recommendations at people. For weight management, the NOW trial demonstrated that genetic-based dietary interventions resulted in far greater long-term reductions in body fat percentage and BMI compared to standard care. And for type 2 diabetes, integrating genomic, metabolomic, and gut microbiome data allows for incredibly precise glycemic control, actively mitigating the risks associated with genes like TCF7L2. The clinical efficacy is literally moving sharply upward.
Section 5. Barriers to widespread adoption. Navigating these systemic challenges.
Of course, it's not all smooth sailing. To safely deploy these advanced health technologies to the masses, the industry has to navigate what's known as the tripartite shield. First up, ethical considerations, managing severe data privacy concerns and securing proper informed consent. Second, social and cultural factors. We have to ensure equitable access and remember to integrate nutrigenetics with the very cultural and sensual ways that humans naturally enjoy food. We aren't robots after all. Finally, legal and regulatory frameworks, navigating highly fragmented FDA regulations for direct-to-consumer tests versus laboratory-developed tests, and ensuring strict compliance. The only safe implementation zone exists right in the overlapping center of these three massive shields.
It's a massive balancing act. Look at the immense clinical promises on one side and the very real systemic risks on the other. The promise of highly optimized individual health brings the serious risk of genomic data misuse, right? So that requires strict regulatory frameworks and robust cybersecurity. The promise of a measurable reduction in chronic disease is heavily threatened by accessibility and high costs. That means this stuff absolutely must be integrated into insurance models and public health subsidies if it's going to realistically work. And finally, the promise of precise interventions replacing trial and error carries the danger of an over-reliance on single genetic variants, a sort of genetic tunnel vision. The mitigation strategy there is adopting that holistic multi-omics approach we broke down earlier, combining your DNA with real phenotypic and lifestyle assessments.
Our final section, number 6, Future of Public Health, from individual luxury to global strategy.
So how does this scale up? Well, it scales through technology. Starting from the individual blueprint on the left, we are seeing the rise of something called metabiotyping. This is where we customize recommendations based on the shared metabolic characteristics of entire groups, efficiently preventing cardiometabolic diseases at scale. By leveraging machine learning and AI-driven predictive models, we can actually automate and design highly performant global nutrition plans. The ultimate goal, shown on the right, is integrating these precision tools directly into our public health frameworks. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about making the wealthiest, healthiest individuals a little bit healthier. It's about permanently elevating global diet quality and finally managing the chronic disease epidemic on a planetary scale.
There's a quote from our source material that absolutely hits the nail on the head. Precision nutrition is no longer about reading our genes. It is about writing a healthier future. That thought perfectly encapsulates our entire journey today. We are fundamentally shifting away from merely observing our static biological blueprints, and we're moving toward actively and precisely optimizing our health outcomes in real time.
Which leaves us with one critical question to consider as you reflect on your own dietary habits, your genetic family history, and your long-term vitality. Are you ready to stop eating for the average human and start feeding your unique biological destiny? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this brought some serious clarity to the future of food and biology. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.